Hey everyone, I want to wish you guys a happy Thanksgiving. And I want to say thanks to my near 2,000 subscribers. We're getting close to breaking that mark. I appreciate every one of you guys that watch my videos, give thumbs up, give comments. I try to respond to everybody. I've been putting more work into the channel here lately. I hope you see that the videos are improving in quality, clarity. I'm trying to do a better job at taking more videos. With that said, I want to give the channel a legitimate name. I've been thinking about this off and on, not every day, but I've been thinking about it through the past couple weeks actually of what to call the channel. And I want it to be something that connects to the channels and to the channel and connects with you guys, the viewers. And in my mind, this does. So I'm going to call the channel Independence Iron. Independence is really because I'm trying to build my independence with these projects. I mean, the wood boiler, we're gonna be able to heat, I'll be able to heat my own house. I won't have to rely on the power company to provide gas to my heater. It's not true independence. We still need the power company a little bit, but it's a step towards the right direction. And that's what you're gonna see here is me taking steps to build my independence. That's sort of what you see out in the tree cutting videos, excavating videos, things like that. I'm making conscious effort to get better at each of those and have the equipment I need to where if I were to be laid off from my job or fired or whatever happened, if I were to lose my job, I can go jump in a piece of equipment that same day and go make money and support my family. And I think a lot of my viewers, you guys are probably the same way, whether you have a little side hustle going in your basement or your garage. I started in all those places as well. I started turning wrenches or screwdrivers even as a young kid, tinkering with RC cars and all kinds of stuff. So I hope that connects. Iron is pretty straightforward. Most tools are made of steel, iron, engine blocks, equipment, heavy iron, small iron, chainsaws, lawnmowers. You guys are probably working with it all, just like I am. So no matter where you're at, I think we're all sort of on the same path of either we're doing it just strictly for fun or we're doing it trying to make a little bit of money. And you'll see some of both. Everything I do here is not solely for an independence reason. I do things just because I like it. I grew up on tractors. I love riding tractors and operating equipment, things like that. So I do it just for fun too. But I also try to learn new things. And again, I'm trying to build some independence out of it as well. So hope you guys can connect with that. I'm going to take you through a couple pictures here of sort of my past and how we built this shop. And because you guys may be at a different level, you guys might be in a small basement or a garage, or you might be in a shop the same size or a bigger shop. No telling where you're at. So I want to show you that I didn't always have everything you see here. Started out a decade ago with a much smaller enterprise, as you would say, or much smaller setup. So I'm going to take you through some pictures and go from there.
Okay, guys, like I said, this all started for me decades ago when I was a kid. I've always loved trucks and equipment and playing in the dirt. I mean, this is me and a buddy of mine from Georgia down there where we got trucks and stuff out here and we're building a little home sites and it's just always sort of seemed natural to me that that's the stuff we grew up doing as kids. This here is me a little bit later. This is probably late high school time frame for me. This is my uncle's tractor. We had it's on our another property of ours in Georgia. We had sold the Fordson Super Major I grew up on. I didn't have a tractor at the time down in Georgia, but we're going to use my uncle's tractor to do some bush hogging. Looks like either I had just got done bush hogging or was about to start bush hogging. This is when things really got deep. When I jumped off the deep end into full on, you could call it DIY, but this was really where I got into building engines. This picture here is probably 2008, 2009, but it started back in 2003 when I think I built my first 5.4 2-valve engine to go in this Mustang. I'd actually bought a truck block off of eBay, with a short block with pistons and rods and all. It had a defect in it. They had to send me another block, had to take it to the machine shop. The project kind of spiraled a little bit, but I did get it done. I took a stock set of heads that I think it had long block. I think it was a long block came with the heads too. Ended up porting the heads on it, putting in a set of comp cams, and I was able to find an SVO intake. It didn't match the ports on these heads. These were PI heads. The SVO intake was non-PI ports. Had a set of adapters. Back then, you could get 5.4 to 4.6 intake adapters. They're thick plates that would give you some intake angle and space over because the 5.4 is wider. And then I was able to sort of grind that port to fit this intake. I was able to grind the intake port to fit that PI shape. So it's an SVO intake that we had to grind into a PI port. Again, everything was always been on the cheap for me. It just sort of seems to be what I've always been used to. And like I said, this is a different iteration here of the engine. This is the 4-valve 5.4 with B heads and intake. I didn't cut and widen that intake, but that intake been cut and widened. I've never been real good at welding aluminum. And then we had gone from naturally aspirated, now the car was supercharged. So it's been a long progression through many iterations, changing the fuel system and everything, but this is where I really got in deep and I just jumped in. I didn't really have nobody around me messed with these modular engines. Everybody messed with the pushrod 302s. I was one of the few people in my area even messing with the modulars back in the early 2000s. This is my first house, the house we still live in. So again, bought it sort of on the cheap. It was old 1925 house, built well. It had been added on to. Needed a lot of updates, but it was on a couple acres, real close to town. The garage is in nice shape, newer garage. It had the barn. See the Mustang sitting in the garage. The tractor, first tractor I bought's right over here. So I wanted acreage because I grew up in Georgia around a lot of acreage. A whole lot more acreage than what's up here, but I had known I'd wanted to build a building, so I wanted at least enough ground where I could build a big shop. And with that in mind, I knew I needed a tractor to prep the ground, bring in rock, move material, things like that. So I bought this tractor. This is a 62 Fordson Super Major front end loader backhoe. Again, I grew up on a Fordson, so I was familiar with the tractor. I knew the tractor was a good tractor. The backhoe, wasn't real sure on it, but it was rough. It needed a lot of work. I think I only paid $2,200 for it, but it ended up put some hoses on it. It got the job done. This is us. I think this is the day we hauled it home, or the next day after we had hauled it home. Just barely sort of fit on this big deck over or tilt deck trailer we had. This trailer is 22 foot up to here, and we still had to curl the bucket and set it on the front of the winch to get a good weight distribution. But the little F-150 towed it well, more than it needed or one it probably should have towed with it, but it got it home. Again, this was basically just going to sit here at home, so this is a one-time sort of tow deal. I don't think this tractor ever left the house other than driving around the neighborhood once or twice. This is a pile of poles. We were getting ready to build a pole barn. This was us going to fetch poles. So that would have been 2011, 2012 time frame. All of these pictures here. I think these were probably going to be some of the side posts because you got the butt end down here, a lot of the creosote in it. This is us loading the poles. So back then, Dad worked for the power company, so he could sort of pick and choose what poles he wanted as he worked through the week. And then we'd go up there, hop on a boom truck. Again, he worked for the company, so there was usually a boom truck sitting at the show up we could get on and load poles with. We didn't tend to use company equipment other than just a piece of equipment, like I said, at the show up just to load poles. So it would have been nice to have a boom truck to set these main beams, but we ended up using this backhoe. Pretty sketchy, really. If one of these hoses blown, this thing would have came down to the ground pretty quick. Dad's up here on a ladder. That would have been real sketchy, but Dad's always been comfortable at heights. Here we are a little further along. Again, we had the main beam set. I'm starting to put up the, I used to call this a rafter. And then we have a truss in the center. So again, we pretty well sawed all this wood except for these main beams and these 2x10s that ran the perimeter, because we were having a hard time getting wood that was that big, be able to saw big chunks of wood. These are 2x10, 2x4, 2x10 sandwiched with 2 courses of OSB on each side to make the main beam. And then actually there's another beam that we added in here later. So you got 2 sort of main beams on each side, sistered on each side of the post. We were off the ladder. We were working on scaffold. We had borrowed this scaffold, so we probably, in hindsight, probably should have rented a scissor lift or something. The rock was pretty compacted. We probably could have drove a scissor lift on it. It would have sped things up a lot. We were having to drag this scaffold around, add to it, take away from it. It took a lot of time, and then as I'm older now, I realize sometimes you need to spend money to save some time, because we're all limited on time. You can always have no money to lots of money, but you can never change the amount of time you have. Me and Dad had actually gone up. I knew we weren't going to have concrete for a while, so to seal the bottom of the walls, sort of make a rat wall, we used these concrete pig slats. And we had gotten these for free from a farmer that was clearing out his pig barn. These things were heavy, 10-footers, 8-footers, and Dad hauled 6-footers in the back of his truck. I think this right here was about 13,000 pounds of pig slats. It was a lot on the trailer and the truck. It was the heaviest thing that truck ever towed. Here we are skinning out the building. Again, me and Dad did all of this. We just by ourselves. We sawed all the wood, built it. So this was by far our biggest DIY, because at the time I didn't have the money to pay to have any of this stuff done anyway. So Dad's walking the purlins. I would load sheets on the bucket. We would raise sheets up, and then I would climb the ladder, get there, and me and Dad would drag the sheets up and then screw them down. A lot of up and down. Again, renting a piece of equipment probably could have helped speed this along, but we used what we had and we made it work. Again, we'd always had the sawmill. Dad bought that, I won't say always, but in the early or late 90s, I think he bought the sawmill when I was in high school. So we did sawmilling on the side. In 08, I'd been laid off from my job, but I was back reemployed. But when I got laid off, I'd started sawmilling on the side for people, and that kind of continued even once I got my job back. So this is us picking up some wood from a guy. I don't think he wanted us to saw it. We just wanted the wood. This was a job, though. This was the little blue tractor over here. It couldn't pick most of these bigger chunks up, so we used lag bolts and the winch on the trailer and the little tractor pushing to drag the stuff up on the trailer. It was it was a tough go. So we knew we wanted to keep sawmilling. We needed a crane of our own. So I bought this crane. Pretty sure I bought it off Craigslist. Drove over to Eastern Indiana to pick it up, about 3 hours away. It was a pretty good crane. Somebody had cut the bed off of a service truck and made it into a trailer. So I hauled that back. I never titled this thing or anything. It was never planned to leave the house, but it had outriggers. It did pretty well. It's shorter than the boom we have right now. And we were running it off the hydraulics of the tractor. So it did a decent job. It was just a little too short, a little too unstable. It couldn't pick up anything real heavy. It just didn't have enough weight, not being attached to a truck. That leads us into, this is probably 2015 timeframe. Maybe 2016. This is actually the picture on the first job I ever took this truck out on. Where I was meeting up with a guy. I was sitting here waiting on him to meet up, and then we were going to go out to this job site. So this crane works well. This truck was a little rusty. Pretty sure me and Dad went halves on this truck. I think it was about $8,500. And we towed the sawmill over, did a job. It worked well. A little slower just because we were trying. That job went slow just because we were trying to figure it out. We were in a tight space. We ended up moving the truck and the material a couple times, so it wasn't very efficient. This is another job we hauled the mill to. This was a job we left the mill there set up for a couple days at a time. Uh, we sawed a lot of Western red cedar power poles. This was actually for my neighbor. He built his own shop with this wood. This is a buddy of mine. So this was when I was getting pretty involved in sawmilling. My buddy he was sort of in between jobs, I think, so he was helping me out, and I was trying to have him saw for me during the week while I was at work, and got a lot done. And it is pretty efficient if you can set the mill up and leave it sitting there and work for a couple days at a time. It's just when you haul the mill to a place and set up, I'm not a big fan of those type jobs. You really don't know what you're getting into unless you've gone and scouted the site ahead of time too. This one wasn't bad. It wasn't probably a year or so later after we bought the truck. Might have been 2 years after we bought the truck. We decided we wanted to skid steer because we were starting to generate big piles of finished wood that needed to be moved around. So we needed something with forks. And my buddy was still helping at that time, so I needed a way for one person to be able to efficiently move a big pile of wood, be able to move big logs, and load the mill. I don't think he ran the crane that much. He'd rather run the skid steer. So we'd actually gone and picked up some walnut here locally in town. It was in the backyard though, so we couldn't get the truck in there. So we took the little tractor, had to drag the walnut out, and it was a tough little job. It was supposed to be easy, but like this piece of wood here, this little tractor didn't want to drag it. I think the front tires were in the air most of the trip out of the yard, and I was steering with the brakes on the back. Sawmilling really became to where you put almost as much work into getting the wood or getting set up every time. And there wasn't a lot of demand in my area. It wasn't the most profitable business to be in. You can actually see the sawmill sitting back there covered up. Here's another job we did. We sawed some real nice red cedar for a guy. Super nice guy. Pretty good little setup here. We had the boom truck in here loading. These are pretty small logs, though. It sawed up pretty quick. And Dad was hauling the mill behind his truck because he usually comes out and helps me on most jobs if he can. He enjoys the stuff just like I do, so I'm fortunate. This, I don't know. This was probably again 2016, 2017. We had a cistern right next to our house. The top had caved in. The previous owners had covered it with a deck. I didn't know that until after we'd already bought the house later, but it was of course right next to the basement wall. It had a crack in it. It was leaking, so the basement wall was tended to always be damp. So I wanted to fill it in. You know, see, I at this point too also found the tracks for the skid steer. We just didn't have them on. So I drove the skid steer down the road a block or two to a house site where they were digging a basement where I get all the free dirt I wanted. And then we ran a dump trailer. And this is probably over capacity for this dump trailer, but dump trailer and the big boom truck, we hauled enough loads to fill that cistern completely in. I think there's a video. If it's not on the channel, I'll definitely have to make sure I post it if I can find it. This was our first big excavating job, I would say, with the skid steer. This is my dad's house. Again, we hadn't never really done this stuff before. We'd always ran farm tractors and stuff. So we tore out his entire driveway. My buddy that was in that previous sawmill picture, I think he came over and helped Dad cut all the concrete in this garage. We broke up all the concrete with the skid steer and a set of forks and drug all the concrete out and piled it up here. And we leveled this ground. We brought in more rock. We formed it all up, laid down mesh, and then we had people come and pour it. We did the same thing at our shop. We did all the dirt work, all the form work, and we just level things out. And then we have people come and pour and do the finishing work. Concrete's one thing. Not scared of it. I just don't have the manpower to be able to do big concrete jobs, or the skill. And it's a skill I don't know that I want to acquire. I'm just more happy paying people for that. Here's a video or a picture of when this was before we had the deck over trailer. We didn't haul the skid steer around a whole lot, but once I got it on tracks, I couldn't haul it on the trailer. So we did haul it over to my wife's parents' house to do some work. And this might have been when we were taking it over there. We hauled it a couple times to a buddy's as well to do some work there, but it didn't leave the house a whole lot. So we'd actually cut a big western cedar pole made it into ramps, and we loaded the skid steer up over the fenders. So we basically made this into a pseudo deck over trailer. Being a tilt deck and then having this angle is a bit sketchy because the tracks, if that log was a little bit wet, this thing didn't want to climb that log. And then we lagged this down into the deck. This thing's so heavy with these tracks, I think it's almost 11,000 pounds. And any kind of twisting, it would try to tear the lags out of the deck. But again, we're on tight budgets, making do with what we had. We had a sawmill, so we just sort of made our own deck over trailer for a while. So this brings us 2019, 2020. I've redone this part of the video a couple times because I start rambling, so I'm going to try to keep it short and concise. We had just bought the excavator right here a little bit before this. I was trying to get out of sawmill and get into excavating. I've never been a huge fan of sawmilling, but really demand in my area is super low for that kind of service. Most of the sawmills that have been in my area have closed up, even to that point. So at least the little small ones. So I wanted to get into excavating. We knew we had this house project coming ahead of us. And actually, I worked with the general contractor to find, he actually had to go through a couple foundation guys to find a foundation crew that would let me do the excavation. We did the demo on the back of the enclosed porch, our decks, all that stuff, cleaned all that stuff out of the way. I did all the excavation work around the site. And that saved us a lot of money because this excavation spiraled. We ended up hitting an abandoned septic tank over here, and we hit an abandoned well over here that had been covered and buried about a foot underground. So it really saved us a lot of money in the spiraling of what the excavation turned into. Also, since I was doing the digging, I had the choice. I had a 16-inch bucket for this, so I could have dug the footer and not formed it, and we didn't form the footers. We left them dug, but I had a 24-inch bucket on here, and I'm like, it's not that much extra concrete. It is, but I was like, I'd rather have a better foundation versus saving a little money on concrete. Because again, I'm doing it myself. So we end up digging the footers all in 24 inches wide. Over here, we had some cave in by the well, so this footer actually got to be like 32 inches in places. So it definitely helps spread out the load of the house. So I'm not as worried about the well subsiding if something ever happens way below it. There's plenty of footprint right there for the foundation. So again, I did it myself, but I made sure I did it to code or above. And again, this all had to be inspected, so it was all done to code, of course, as well. Plumbing, electrical. We also had a chimney in here we demoed, and that's where the little Hilti hammer drill I bought that at auction too. That thing came in super handy for demoing that chimney. So again, I'd never used the excavator much before this, so this was a big test of my capabilities and my expertise, or my lack of expertise. I had to build a lot of expertise and figure out how to plan to move all this dirt. And it was a good learning experience because I'd rather do it on my own property before I go and try to do it at somebody else's. This leads us into pretty well where we're at currently. We've got the bucket. The bucket has spiraled out of anything I would have imagined. We bought it to do our own tree work, just like we bought a good bit of this stuff, I guess, to do our own work with. But Dad had gotten a tree quoted. He'd had multiple people supposedly come look at it. Nobody, only got one quote out of the deal, and I think the quote was for $3,500 to take a big elm hanging over his shop. That was just to put it on the ground. That wasn't even to clean it up. And he had a couple other trees, which we just did one here recently that a video will come out on. And he's got another one to do. So we haven't even gotten all the tree work we wanted to do with the bucket, because once we got a bucket, people saw it sitting in our yard, people saw it over at Dad's house. all the neighbors like flooded in. Hey, I've got tree work I need done, and will you do it for us? So it really spiraled out of hand pretty quickly, and I ended up taking a neighbor's tree over here. I had a big tree I had to take over in my yard. I wanted to do a bunch of trimming down the shop line that I haven't actually finished that part yet. And we've taken trees for all the neighbors around me. Actually, I've taken trees for two neighbors behind me, two neighbors across the street. So I mean, we've just been busy. We've been branching out into further tree trimming jobs too. So I mean, it's really one. The demand is super high, and I enjoy it actually. I'm glad we got it, and it's definitely pushed my capabilities, my expertise, and pushed me into more of a customer facing, to where with sawmilling I had customers but not a whole lot of them. I have to deal with a lot more people with the bucket trucks. So I'm not super great at that, but I do enjoy learning and improving even those skills, my people skills. You'll see on the channel here, we bought this newer excavator. That is really to replace the small one, and it sort of matches with the bucket. Again, the bucket, Dad had a CDL, so he worked for the power company. We were familiar with bucket trucks, and I think it pushed me to get my CDL because I think Dad's going to let his lapse. So again, I've had to expand my capability more than I ever really imagined, and that's just led me into now I can push even further into bigger equipment, which I hadn't really planned on, but it's just sort of, I guess, a natural evolution. So we will probably end up getting rid of this dump truck here. I've got the big red dump truck. To my point on the equipment, though, I wouldn't be where I'm at without my dad or a partner. I mean, my dad enjoys this kind of work, so we partnered together to buy some of this equipment. I have partnered with my buddies, other buddies. I partnered with a buddy on house flipping there for a couple of years too, where we would split buying houses. I mean, if you don't have the money all on your own or the capability, you can partner up. It definitely is beneficial. I would still be doing what I'm doing without partners, but I would just be a lot further behind. It's a pooling of resources. I'm not against it. I'm not totally independent. I couldn't do what I do without my great family, my wife, my kids, my parents, good friends. It all goes a long way. But again, I do like building my own capabilities up. Independence is some just what personal independence, skills, things like that. It's all sort of the same to me, I guess. As far as equipment and partnering, Dad bought the bucket truck. That's all his. I bought the excavator. I bought the trailer. I bought this dump truck and the big red dump truck. The little mini, we partnered half and half on it. We partnered half and half on the green crane truck. I think Dad bought the skid steer all himself. The sawmill's Dad's, and the little blue tractor's Dad's. I bought the bigger blue 3600 tractor. So I mean, it's sort of all over the place. There's no real rhyme or reason on why. Some of it's just whose finances are in better shape at the time we want something. But again, this is the kind of stuff you're going to see on this channel. I'm going to continue growing if I can, if it makes sense. Right now, I'm kind of currently growing in the tree business. We might be looking to replace the green crane truck with a bigger boom truck or something. And we've sort of already replaced the dump truck. I need to fix up the Bobcat, the little Bobcat, and get it gone. So definitely more videos to come. Hope you guys enjoy this stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed hearing sort of my progression through building my little shop and my fleet. And hope you guys like and subscribe and keep watching. More to come. Thank you.